One of the most powerful evidences of the gospel, of the power of Christ, is how that power and how Jesus changes lives. This morning, we are privileged to have a testimony. We're going to hear about God's grace, God's forgiveness, and the power of Christ in someone's lives. Heather Johnston is coming to share her testimony. Heather, come on up.
Good morning. My name is Heather Johnston, and I'm 23 years old. And in my short 23 years, I've lived a bit of a rough past. I've been through a lot of things that most people my age can't say that they've dealt with. When I was a little girl, I was saved and I was baptized, and I accepted God into my heart. But at that time, I didn't fully understand what it was to be saved, what it was to be able to pray and to have God walk with you. So my walk with God didn't last very long. When I was in 4th grade, my mom was working 2 jobs, so she couldn't be home all the time. My dad worked 16-hour shifts, if not more, and whenever he was home, he was drinking, so he wasn't really home anyways. My oldest brother, I thought, didn't like me because he picked on me all the time, and my other brother went to go stay with his mom, and I finally realized he was never coming back, and I thought it was my fault. And aside from personal problems at home, at school, I was bullied a lot. And I remember one day, a kid just in 4th grade had told me, "I hate you, I wish you were dead." So, at 10 years old, I tried to end my own life because I didn't know that I could pray to God and I could ask Him for His help on how to deal with these things. Shortly after that, I turned to self-harm. And I had started cutting. I had fought with anorexia. I had fought with this depression and anxiety all throughout my teenage years. And all the while, God was still sitting there with me, trying to get me to come home, get me to come walk with Him again. See, when I was 14, I moved to Michigan with my dad, who was going to ministry school to be a preacher. And I had left Texas to go up there to run away from my problems. And one thing that I've learned, you can't run away from your problems if you're still going to not let God help you. God was trying to bring these good people in church and these good influences in my life so I could be helped, and I still turned away. I was still walking away from God, and things got so much worse. By the time I was 18, I had lost somebody who had become very dear to me. I had lost my first child, and again, I didn't know how to handle it. I turned to alcohol. And I was finding myself in every bottle that I could open, every party that I was invited to. I would go out and stay out all night and go to work the next day, and I would tell myself that I was happy, that I was okay. And now looking back, I realize I wasn't. I chose to leave once again, and I was trying to run away. And I left to move to Wichita. But you can't pack up these boxes of problems and troubles and these bad habits and try to leave them behind you if you're going to pick one out and say, "No, I want to take this one with me." And that's what I did. I took my alcoholism with me to Wichita, which still didn't help anything. One blessing that did come out of that, though, was God gave me the gift of a son. And it's amazing being a mom. It really is. But if, once again, you're not walking with God, it can be harder than what you think. Shortly after my son was born, postpartum depression made its home in my heart and changed everything from the inside out. I was angry. I was hurt. I was just so mean all the time. And 3 short months after having my little boy, he left. I lost him because I pushed him and his father away. And instead of doing the smart thing and turning to family or turning to church or turning to a Bible in my living room, I turned to somebody who at that time I didn't even know very well. And I thought this person would come in and he would pick up all of my pieces and put me back together. Well, I now see that nobody can do that for you except for God. Because this person, he picked up my pieces, but slowly he threw them into a wood chipper to break me even more. This person led me to my biggest downfall yet. I had turned to drugs out of curiosity because alcohol wasn't doing it anymore. And I had heard so many stories from him and his friends and these bad people that I allowed to be in my life. And for a year and a half, I was stuck. I had so many things stolen from me and sold. I was thrown on the floor, beaten, cursed, and called out of my name, and I didn't care. When it comes down to it, I did not care because I was so hooked and grabbed by this drug, by Satan, through this drug and these people. I let it happen. I made the second smartest choice of my life on December 12th of 2015. I chose to walk away from it all. Come August, I will be 8 months clean. Thank you. Now, all throughout my life, I've noticed a pattern. I've always tried to feel accepted and wanted and loved and feel like I'm good enough, but I've chose relationships or friends or other people to say, you know what, you're okay. And after a while, they don't tell me that anymore. After a while, things turn into, I can't stand you, or I don't know who you are anymore, and it's because I let these people change me. And I have found after this past struggle that really just slammed me into rock bottom, that I don't need to look for that anymore. I was with somebody in recent months that I went back to drinking every day. I was cursed and called out of my name. I would try to walk out and leave, and I would be dragged back into the house. And finally, one night after a big fight, I sat on the steps, and I hadn't prayed in forever. But I sat on those steps and I cried, God, please get me out of this. Please help me. And just a few days after that, without even talking to anybody for weeks before this, my mom and my stepdad showed up looking for me. And after telling them a little bit of what had been going on, they said, you've got a way out. All you have to do is ask. See, God answers prayers because if I can live the life that I have and I can sit there and pray for God to help me, that's the biggest proof of God's love that I've ever seen in my life. Because I'm out of that situation now, and I finally realized and I've come to terms, I can't live like that anymore. My mom and stepdad picked me up on a Sunday morning, and by Monday night, my mom found me crying in the dark on the back porch. She said, what are you doing? I said, just praying. When she asked me, what about? I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't live my life like I've been living anymore. All I'm doing is destroying myself and my life, and it's affecting me and my children, and I can't do this. And she said, don't tell me. You have to tell God. And so we both got down on our knees, and together we prayed for God to come into our lives and to help me to take over my life and lead me to where I'm supposed to be. And we continued talking for a few hours after that. And I had to stop her while she was trying to talk to me. I couldn't even pay attention. It was the most overwhelming feeling. I said, this is going to sound really weird, but it's not just us back here anymore. We're not the only ones in the yard. It was this overwhelming, all around me feeling of warmth. And just something was there with us, and I believe that it was God had surrounded me and my mom. And finally, I had let him into my heart and let him take over my life. And he was showing me He is there. And it's just like I told her again this morning, I've been shivering in here all morning, and right before I came up, my whole body got warmth like I was wrapped in a blanket. And that's God with me. I now feel like I have a purpose in my life. I feel like I have something that I'm supposed to be doing, and I feel like that is leading someone to God, helping people see that they're not alone, and even if their past is just like mine or worse, there is hope for them. And that's what I intend to do with the rest of my life, is be a tool for God and help people reach Him. Thank you.
Powerful testimony. The power of God. Thank you, Heather, for sharing that. And thank you as well for your commitment now to take that story and to share it with others. And to take your life that has been changed and use it as an example for others. That's what we're to do. As Christians, we are ambassadors for Christ. And the greatest thing that you can do is tell people how Christ has changed your life. Because that's the one thing they cannot argue with. But thank you so much for sharing that. There are certain words that you get tired of hearing. Certain words that get thrown at you, especially when you tell somebody you're a Christian. You're a person of faith. Now, most of the time it's not aimed at us personally. It's aimed at us as a group because we have stated an allegiance to something. We have stated that we believe a certain way. We have stated that we stand for certain things. You'll see it sometimes on television, but in our electronic age, it's most rampant on social media. If you want to see what other people say about Christianity and the faith, do this. Go find an article somewhere online that has to do anything with Christianity or faith or even spirituality, and read it. And it doesn't matter the site. You would not believe some of the things that I can read, for instance, at Christianity Today. A good article, but then what follows is where the problem comes in. When you're done with the article, scroll down and read some of the comments. And you will be amazed at the things you see. People are very bold and courageous when they're sitting behind a computer and they're not talking to somebody face to face. It's real easy to blast somebody for something they believe, for something they stand for the way they live, when you're not having to do it in person. When it's anonymous, you're a stranger talking to a stranger. And you can't read an article on Christianity or the faith or even spirituality anymore without seeing some of this in there. You'll encounter somebody, or oftentimes a bunch of somebodies, who want to express their displeasure. They want to give their opinion about things. And then usually the name-calling starts. Names get thrown around, labels get applied, and they can be very vicious. The two most common terms that you'll see are hypocrite and judgmental. if you dare to speak out about what you believe, if you dare to take a stand for God, if you dare to quote the Bible, you'll be labeled. Some people will label you that way. They're not nice terms, and they're always used in a negative sense. But you know something? They're not new. They were around 2,000 years ago. And Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, addresses both of them. In chapter 7, Jesus talks about being judgmental. We're going to get to that one in a couple of weeks. But this morning, we're in chapter 6, and we're going to talk about hypocrites. Now, we have been working through the Sermon on the Mount, which is Jesus' most famous and most often quoted teaching in the Bible. It's quoted by Christians and it's quoted by non-Christians when they tell us that we're judgmental or they tell us that we're a hypocrite. The Sermon on the Mount's located in Matthew, chapters 5 through 7. This morning we are in chapter 6. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is specifically talking to His disciples, the 12 that He had chosen that were going to found the church and carry on the ministry after He left. But they are not the only ones there. They are the main audience, but there are also people around who are following Him, who have started to come to faith in Him. There's people who are following just because they want to see what all the commotion is. And as we know through the gospel accounts, there's the opposition group that's always following Him around to hear what He has to say. His teaching is given for everybody to hear, but the instruction is being given specifically to the followers, to those who profess their faith in Him, to those who say they want to follow Him. So all of us who make that profession of faith, who claim the name of Christ, we need to pay attention to the words that He says. We're going to begin in it's Matthew 6 and start right at the first verse. Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven." Jesus begins with a warning. He says, watch out that you don't do this. He mentions acts of righteousness. And He's going to proceed in the next several verses to explain the three most important and most common, what were called acts of righteousness that were being performed back in that day. The rabbis of Jesus' day considered these three acts to be the chief proof of your devotion or of your faith, having a pious behavior. They are, first one is almsgiving, the second one is prayer, and the third one is fasting, which is a biblical discipline that's fallen out of popular use in our culture, but still has an important point and still is very relevant to the Christian walk. And with all three of these acts of righteousness, Jesus is going to give 4 points of instruction. First, there's going to be a warning about it, about doing the act to be practiced or noticed by others. Secondly, there's going to be a guarantee that those who do it just to be noticed, that is the only reward they're going to receive. They'll receive that and nothing more. Third, He's going to give us an instruction for how to properly practice these acts of righteousness. And fourth, there's going to be a guarantee that our Heavenly Father will reward the proper practice. This morning we're going to begin with something called almsgiving. Almsgiving was the practice of giving food or money to needy people. There were needy people back in that day. There are needy people here today. We've practiced some almsgiving this past week. Over here is our submarine of food from Submerged. The children that came to Vacation Bible School this week brought cans, boxes brought food items. The mission for this Vacation Bible School was our food pantry. Not sure if everyone knows, but we do have a food pantry here that we use to help people here in Chillicothe. We have several families that come every month, and we provide bags of food to help them get through the tough times. And the kids brought these cans, and look at that. I mean, that's amazing. We were low, and we said we need some help, and this is the response that we got. That is almsgiving. That is giving food to help the poor. We collected our banks this morning for the Texas food offering. That is almsgiving. That money is sent to the Baptist Convention. It is used to help feed hungry people in the state of Texas. We practice almsgiving, but we never think of it that way. And we do it because we want to help needy people. Now, during Vacation Bible School, as an incentive, each of the children that brought a can got a ticket. And at the end of the night, there was a drawing for prizes. So we gave a little incentive there to help further the pot a bit. But when they went home and asked for things to bring, their parents didn't give it to them so they could win a prize. They brought them because they were helping out someone. We practice almsgiving. We often don't think of it that way. But Jesus is talking about that in this passage, and he's going to talk about how it was being practiced, what was wrong with the way it was being done, and the right way to do it. See, back in his day, they took up collections as well. And when those collections were being taken, a problem arose. Some of the people were giving, but they were giving their alms or their gifts not so much to help somebody out, but to get the publicity for it, to get the accolade for it, to get the approval of their fellow men. Jesus had previously told the disciples about something he called a superior righteousness, a righteousness that exceeds that of the Pharisees. And the righteousness that he's talking about is not something that's an act between man and man. It's between man and God. And when practicing righteousness, Jesus warns about the danger of being that word that we get thrown at us that he's going to use, hypocrite. You'll see in verse 2, he says, "So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full." Now, sounding the trumpet's a figurative way. It means drawing attention to yourself, blowing your own horn, making it all about you, doing something not so much to help others, but so other people would see that you are doing it. Jesus says these people, and he was directing this at the Pharisees, at the religious leaders, at the officials of what constituted the place of worship back then. The leaders in the Jewish community, and he says they're a bunch of hypocrites. Matthew's going to use this word multiple times as he goes through Jesus' life. He's going to use this word hypocrite. The word itself means play actor. It was most commonly used of stage actors. So think about, what does an actor do? They play a role of somebody they're not. They say words and do things that's not them. It's a role. It's somebody else. That's not who they are. They pretend to be somebody else. And that was Jesus' concern with the leaders of Israel. He viewed them as hypocrites, and he uses this example as a way to show that their behavior was not genuine. See, they gave to the poor, but they gave so they would receive something in return. He says here the reason they gave was so that they would be honored by men. And then he says that they're going to receive their reward in full. That means that the applause of men, the honor of men, they will receive that, but that is all they're going to receive. When he says they'll receive their reward in full, that's all they're going to get. And that's what they sought. They sought to look good in front of their fellow men. When he says that, what he's telling them is, if that's what you're after, if that's your reason for doing it, you'll get that. And that will be your only reward. There won't be a reward from God. Their reward will be the applause of men, because that's what they were seeking. By drawing attention to themselves, they were showing that was their true motive. They were not as concerned for the poor and needy as they were concerned about looking good in everybody else's eyes. You know, they looked down upon the poor. They looked down upon the needy. They looked down upon the sick, the lame, women, children. They looked down on just about everybody. And that is the exact opposite of how Jesus views people. They looked at these people and said they have no value. Jesus comes along and lifts them up and says, every one of you has value. Complete opposite to what Jesus did. They weren't concerned with those people. They were concerned with themselves. And now Jesus is going to instruct his disciples, his followers, and us on the proper way to practice almsgiving. In verses 3 and 4 he says, "But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." You heard that expression before, haven't you? Left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. We use that sometimes. A lot of times it's used in the sense of two different sides being counterproductive. Actually, they're doing this, nobody knows what each other's doing. And oftentimes, and you can see that in an organization, you can see that in a community where they're working on something and with neither side knows what the other one's doing, and it's not productive sometimes. The idea here is that each doesn't know what the other's doing, and he says that. When Jesus says that to his disciples, that's what he means. Your giving is done in secret. It's not for the acclaim of the public, not for the accolades of people, but secretly, really so that others don't know what you gave. To do it in secret, not letting the left hand know what the right hand's doing. See, self-glorification is a clear and present danger for all of us. It's so easy to fall into that trap. I have. I've fallen into that before. To do things so that I get the acclaim, that somebody notices that I did it. So I might feel esteemed by other people. And the world is full of people who act like that. And Jesus is warning his followers, us, that we're not supposed to be that way. That's what it means, really, to be a hypocrite. To do something outwardly that presents one face, one mask, when inside you're totally different. To inwardly feel and act differently. When we do that, when we do things like that, we're seeking a reward from other people. We're seeking to draw attention to ourselves so that others will notice and think better of us, think we're good people, like us because of the things we do. And if that is our motive, that's the only reward we're going to get. the applause of man. And Jesus says there's a better reward here, an eternal reward. He says, your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. A reward from God is promised. What that reward exactly is, we don't know. He doesn't say. Rewards come in a variety of ways, a variety of manner, and at a variety of time. It may be a reward that we don't see until we get to heaven. It may be a reward that we get to enjoy during this lifetime. The exact nature of the reward, the exact timing of the reward, we're not given. What is given is a promise, a guarantee that there will be a reward from God. The reward the hypocrites, as Jesus called them, sought was the acclaim of man for something that comes immediately but is very fleeting. It comes, it makes you feel good, but it's very temporary. The reward that we should seek is a reward from God. Something that may not come immediately, but is promised that it will come, and it is eternal. It will be with us forever. That is the best reward. If you look back at the start of verse 3 there, you'll find something interesting. When we read Scripture, we need to pay attention to the small words. In this case, the word when. Jesus does not say, if you give to the poor. He says, when you give to the poor. Small words can make a huge difference in our understanding and even in our theology. And in this case, it's true. It is not a question of whether or not we give to the poor. We are instructed to give to the poor. Jesus says when, indicating He expects His followers to practice almsgiving, giving to the poor and needy. He assumes we will do it. There's no question in Jesus' mind about whether it's going to get done. It's not optional. As His followers, we are to give. Giving is not optional. If it was, He would have said if. If you decide to give. He didn't say that. He said when, indicating the assumption that we will practice giving. See, the solution to the problem of drawing attention to yourself when giving isn't to not give. It's to give in secret. To give without drawing that attention to yourself or making a public act of your giving. And that's the kind of giving that God honors. See, God doesn't honor things that are done hypocritically. He doesn't honor things that are done for show. He honors the things that come from the heart. The things that we do that come from our heart. The things that we do out of obedience to Him. Out of our love for Him. Those are the things that God honors. Almsgiving is the first of the 3 righteous acts. And Jesus explained here the 4 things He wants us to see about it. We don't do it for the praise of man. And we're told, secondly, if you do it just to get the acclaim of man, you'll get that, and that is the only reward you're going to get. And then He instructed us how to properly do it, to do it in secret without drawing attention to ourselves. And then He says finally, if you will do it that way, you are promised not a temporary reward, but an eternal reward from God Himself. That's the first step in how not to be a hypocrite. We're going to look at the other 2 in the coming weeks. And as followers of Jesus, those who have placed their faith in Him, those of us who claim that we are Christians, we are His ambassadors. Paul tells us that in 2 Corinthians. We are ambassadors for Christ. That means we represent Him. May all of us take seriously that role, and may we live our lives so that the way we live when we come to church is the way we live out in the community. May we do the things that He tells us to do. Sure, we're going to foul up from time to time, and we know the critics are sitting there just waiting. They'll ignore the 99 times you did it right and jump on the one that you did wrong. We know that. But we still strive to follow the things that Jesus has told us to do. We're going to have a time of response this morning as Joe comes to play. And during this time, I wanted all of us to ask ourselves this question. If we say we're a follower of Christ, are we doing everything for God? Or are we doing some things for the applause of man? It's something we need to consider, each of us. Examine our walk. Why do we do the things we do? Is there some area we need to work on so that we may be a more effective and true ambassador for Him? Remember, the only rewards that are valuable and everlasting are the ones that come from God. And if you're not a follower of Christ, please consider the gospel message. Jesus came and died on the cross for your sins, and He rose again on the third day. And He says that if we believe that, we believe in what He did, place our faith in Him, that we will have an eternal reward. We will live in heaven with Him forever. We heard a powerful testimony this morning about the power of God. Heather shared her life story, and you see how powerful God is. It's a wonderful example of how He can change lives. If you've never considered the gospel message, or if you have and you've put God back on the shelf, consider that this morning. The gospel changes lives. Let it change yours.